Well, good evening, everyone. And once again, welcome to Environmental Coffee House. Hi, Jen. I am Sandy Schoelles, and this is Jennifer Hynes. Welcome.
Hello. Hello, everybody. Good to be with you all tonight. We have an absolutely dynamite show, and I want to go through some of the things that we're going to be going over
A
tonight. It's
lot.
pretty fascinating, and Sandy has made such a good video. Oh my God. It was just amazed, of course. So, the first
Okay.
thing we're going to actually cover is from PBS Timeline, The Politics of Climate Change. And then we're going to jump over to grist. When did Republicans start hating the environment? Roughly 1991,
Okay.
according to a new study.
So method to the madness.
Method to the madness. And we're going to kind of
Yeah.
pay homage to statista.com and look at some stats and opinions that the Republicans have and opinions that the Democrats have. And then we're going to run over to The Guardian. Oil lobbyists spend millions to stall California's game changing climate bill. So, very interesting, oil lobbyists getting all involved in California's climate bill. What could go wrong with
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
Nothing, I
right.
guess.
Could go
Right? Uh, Al
wrong.
Jazeera is our next one. Oil giants invest in exploration as profits trump climate. I wish that
They
Trump
didn't
hadn't
use the
ruined
word.
didn't ruin the word Trump. He's such a fucking bastard. I hope he dies.
Oh my God,
Sorry.
Jennifer, what a way to start. Well,
I'm
give him some more
sorry.
McDonald's.
I'm just like, I'm so over that guy. Okay, eenews.net.
Yeah.
Senate Democrats look for staffers to probe fossil fuels.
Yeah, a lot of good. All right.
Yeah. And then inside climate news, June extremes suggest parts of the climate system are reaching tipping points. And I guess, Sandy, we're ending up with something from the climate classroom on News Channel 8. Earth's hottest weather in 120,000
Yeah,
years.
that's Jeff
It's
Bardelli.
just getting started.
Yeah,
Oh,
Jeff.
Jeff Bardelli. There you
Yeah.
go, Jeff
So
Bardelli.
we're
So, guys, that
yeah.
is it. That's what we have.
Yep. And we have a for you guys with our new format of reading overlay. And so
There we
tonight,
go.
as we're sharing each other, all
Mhm.
right, here's the show. And I thought, well, let's talk a little bit about Jennifer's Zen.
Mhm.
Jennifer?
Yeah, well, guys, it's been super rainy, and it's actually raining right now as we speak here in the arid high kind of. It's not quite high desert, but it's arid, right? Colorado on the plains, it's always kind of bristly and knobby here, but not anymore. Now we are talking about being in Northern Virginia or, Ohio or something like that. I don't know, someplace that gets a lot of rain. So you can see it's just kind of lush. This is my backyard. And this is a little path, and everything's very verdant and kind of just glowing because
Beautiful.
we've had an inclement amount of water here and continue to.
Yeah, and that
Sorry.
look at it. Look at it.
Yeah,
You're
I
right. It
know.
looks like Virginia.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
And
So there
there's your
you
roll.
go.
Is that your roll around on the grass area?
Yeah, exactly.
And then, of course, we've got your little baby.
No trouble.
Yeah, your sweetheart that likes to jump on you. So
Yeah, she
that
does.
was Jennifer Zen. Now, tonight, I don't have any Zen because you see all of my stuff on the Disabled Able Gardener, and ad nauseum, you know what everything looks like. So I want to show you something I won. And I won this box. And it's a beautiful handmade wooden box, and that's a metal top. Well, it's the perfect size for the beautiful artwork that Jonathan O, who is our administrator on Facebook and programs that page, all of his original Jesus Crisis series that he drew for the for our Facebook page, and he's kind of dark and different like me, and I like it, and it's beautiful stuff. So now I have the originals, and hopefully I'll make another video. I promised him I would make a much better video because I'm much better than I was in the beginning. So and then I'm just gonna move on to the joke on I put everywhere because I found it. I thought it was hilarious. People are buying rocks. And I'm like, I could make a fortune if I sold rocks off my property. Maybe I could get my roof. So somebody on Twitter said, well, don't you think you'd make more money if they each had like googly eyes? So I put googly eyes on them. So
Oh.
yeah, what doomer show would be complete without a little bit of humor in the beginning, and sharing ourselves with you
Yeah,
guys. You know,
absolutely.
you're there with us every week. But now we're stepping over a little bit, and we're gonna look from Peter Carter. This was his graph on, you know, it's not even like we have to look at them so close from climate reanalyzer, Jen. It's like the same up.
Every graph that you look at, no matter what it's measuring, is going up and it's going off the scale. So again, here we are, 21.8 C or 85 C, and that was on July 5th, and that was the hottest temperature
Mm-hmm.
ever,
Globally, global
ever
temperatures.
globally. Yeah,
Yeah,
if you
and
average it all up.
here's another
And then
view.
you can see, yeah,
Oh wait, we
yeah.
can go back. We can go
Well,
back.
it's okay. It's just like that drill down. You can see it's really breaking away on top of that black line, just to kind of show you how quickly it's going out of the norm now. It's kind of like,
Freaking
that's
them
it.
out on the scientists
Freaking
out.
bad. Oh,
And
yes.
here's
This,
just
this
more
one.
versions of the same thing. Last we showed you the last week we showed you this the temperature anomaly. This is from the 6th yesterday from Climate Reanalyzer 1979 to 2000 base, but this is what's happening, now. That's the comparison. And
Mm.
again, just look up the
Oof,
anomaly, a positive.
so bad.
Yeah, see the
So
anomaly.
bad. I mean, that's scary. That's actually scary. And what is this exactly, Sandy? The world temperature, and I can't really read that
It's the
title.
world
Second.
temperature, and it just has dates and the corresponding years on the bottom, but I can't click this because it's just a screenshot.
Yeah,
So I could
gotcha.
put a link in the show notes like I always do if you want to find this graph.
Oh,
Yeah, it just illustrates where we're at right now, and it's freaking these scientists out, and like
oh,
this,
shit.
okay? So this is the temperature in Algeria in Adrar, but this was at night. There's no respite. There's no cooling down. This was at night. And that's what stood out. And then we move on. And I picked out Alexander. He's another climate scientist. And how exceptional is global temperature over the last few days? Actually, we might be challenging even the last interglacial period, the Eemian, 130,000 years ago, regarding average and highly uncertain reconstructions. Current temperature are not far from the peak Eemian temperatures. It's a little spooky when you get into those terms.
Mhm. It is.
So you see,
God.
Jen, on the bottom, they show the estimated average global temperature for the last interglacial Eemian period, and they use from different years. These are the attributions here, and then the centennially smoothed Holocene temperature
Mm.
and the 11-year mean of modern data as anomalies relative to 1880 to 1920, which the other graphs also used. Vertical downward arrows indicate likely overestimates. Okay, so it's very interesting, but look where we are now.
It's so scary. Oh my
And
God.
I
I
mean, I'm
mean, when you
laughing out of
see that
nerves.
escalation, look at that. It just goes zoop, and it's not showing any signs of abating, you know?
No,
We haven't
of
really
course not.
even begun.
And then we go to the oceans. And it's not that much different than obviously last week, but you see the little spikes, the ebbs and flows. But this is 2023. The oceans are hot. Psst, hot.
I mean, really
They're
a lot
hot.
different. Really a lot different than it was before. Holy crap, this is intense.
Yeah, I
Oh my
know.
gosh.
I know. But guess what, guys? Guess where we're going next?
Mm.
We're going to Florida. And I am going to get this ready, and we're going to hear Florida news.
No break from the heat just yet here in Central Florida.
Here's a look at the feels like temperatures outside right now. And of course, remember, some areas have seen some rain. So there it is, 104 in Sanford, 105 in DeLand. These are going to be for Friday. This week, we set a new record for the hottest day ever recorded on Earth.
West 2's Marlene Martinez spoke with a professor at Rollins College who has written 3 books on climate change about what this all means for us moving forward.
Terry Stoves has been fishing at Lake Monroe for 20 years.
No bites yet?
No, we got a couple of little bites, but nothing much.
He says the past couple years have been different.
The heat has been tremendous.
That's why he tries to get out here early.
It is affecting the fish, though, especially in the shallow water here.
It's not just Terry who's feeling the heat, but millions of others. According to NOAA, 38 million Americans were under some sort of heat alert on Wednesday. That comes after the Earth saw its hottest day on record on Wednesday and Tuesday, an average temperature of nearly 63 degrees across the globe.
And we're going to have to make some changes.
We spoke with Mike Gunter, a political science professor at Rollins College. He's written 3 books on climate change, including the uneven impact to communities that have less money.
And so we're seeing higher rates of ambulance calls, higher rates of heat stroke.
Gunter says the change in our climate is underscoring the importance for people to make a change.
We're making it much more likely that we'll have extreme weather, extreme heat, like we've been seeing. The greenhouse gases that we're pumping in to the atmosphere.
Gunter encourages folks to look at how they can live differently, like considering solar and different transportation options.
Think about what can we do tomorrow, next week, next year to help minimize these future threats of high temperatures.
In Seminole County, Marlene Martinez, West 2 News.
So there you go. That was Florida.
God. Wow.
But guess what, Jennifer?
What?
We're getting saved.
Oh, good. I'm relieved. Really, I was getting
Yeah, Dr. Patrick Brown, the eco-modernists are going to save us. And in fact, he says, my biggest issue with the eye-catching visual below is that it makes it seem like humans only thrive within a very narrow 1C range. But if we look across space today, from the coldest to the hottest country capitals, our settlements range over 31C, which is 56F, hardly a narrow niche. Now, let me tell you about him. And you look at Khartoum and what they put down for Khartoum as the 30C, the annual mean temperature in Khartoum. Well, I looked at Khartoum, and today Khartoum was 101 degrees. But what he's failing to say is that if it's that now, what's it going to be in 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever? He's not saying that. And then,
well, he also doesn't mention that crops stop photosynthesizing at 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, if it hits 104 degrees day after day in the crop fields, your wheat crop or whatever grain you're trying to grow for your people is not going, it's going to fail, so.
exactly. And then they were talking about Mongolia being cold. But even the cold climates this year, and we're seeing the countries that are having hot weather in the winter, Australia and Spain. You'll see. We know it's insane. So it's figures. They're from the Breakthrough Institute, and it's good old Ted Nordhaus, who wrote the book with Michael Schellenberger. And they figure that, technological breakthroughs are going to save us, and nuclear, that's what's going to save us.
I'm relieved.
Yeah. Let's take a big deep breath. Then we'll move on
You're
to
saved.
Yeah, right? Then we'll move on to NASA. And I don't know if you guys can read everything. I didn't realize that the color. Oh, there you go. I think
Looks
it's
nice.
better now. Okay, so NASA, which I think is more level-headed than what we were seeing with the eco-modernists, although, you know, they mean well. They believe what they want for the world. Unofficial records suggest that in recent days, the global average temperature was the warmest that has ever been directly measured. What does that mean? Jen, can you see it?
No, I can't read it,
Okay.
unfortunately, so you'll have to take care. It
So what
means
does
that
it
we
mean?
are so fucked. It means we are so fucked. That's what it means. Honestly. Just really.
Yeah, she's got it. Yep. Okay. That's what it means. Oh, okay. We'll give that a hand. July 4th and 5th had the warmest global temperature since 1979, according to an estimate by the University of Maine's Climate Reanalyzer, which compiles daily climate data from around the world. So heat waves are currently affecting both land and ocean, with unusually warm temperatures in the southern U.S., Canada, Greenland, Russia, and Antarctica. The global average temperature on July 4th and 5th was 62.92 degrees Fahrenheit or 17.18 Celsius. NASA uses both short and long-term data to understand the Earth's climate. Global thermometer records go back to around 1880, but our planet holds climate clues dating back more than 3 million years. So researchers at NASA and elsewhere, they use evidence of past climate contained in rock layers, polar ice sheets, lake beds, and more. Our long-term view of Earth's climate system gives us important context to understand our current and future climate. So this is what this was their graphic I saw first, and I wanted to, at least explain it. So, and that's what I got in the slideshow. Yay! But now, guys, what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the movie. And I have a movie.
It's a good one.
And yes, this introduces us to the real topic of the whole show tonight. So enjoy. It's a bit of a long one. Hope you have the popcorn. And then we will get started with the rest of the show. So, here we go. How did we get here?
There's something in these pictures you can't see. It's essential to life.
Okay. Hang on a second. Where is it? It's supposed to be playing, but it is not. All right, give me a second, guys. I get a little what I'm going to do is play it.
There's something in these pictures you can't see. It's essential to life. We breathe it out. Plants breathe it in. It comes from animal life, the oceans, the earth, and the fuels we find in it. It's called carbon dioxide, CO2. The fuels that produce CO2 have freed us from a world of back-breaking labor, lighting up our lives, allowing us to create and move the things we need, the people we love. Now some politicians want to label carbon dioxide a pollutant. Imagine if they succeed. What would our lives be like then? Carbon dioxide. They call it pollution. We call it life.
Hi, I'm Nancy Pelosi, lifelong Democrat and Speaker of the House.
And I'm Newt Gingrich, lifelong Republican, and I used to be Speaker.
We don't always see eye to eye, do we, Newt?
No, but we do agree our country must take action to address climate change.
We need cleaner forms of energy, and we need them fast.
If enough of us demand action from our leaders, we can spark the innovation we need.
Go to wecansolveit.org. Together, we can do this.
Hell, let's face it, we're polar opposites.
We couldn't be further apart. I'm on the left.
And I'm usually right. And we strongly disagree.
Except on one issue. Tell them what it is, Reverend Pat.
That would be our planet. Taking care of it is extremely important.
We all need to work together, liberals and conservatives.
So get involved. It's the right thing to do.
Now there you go again.
Join us. Together we can solve the climate crisis. Go to wecansolveit.org.
You know, I've owned 3 different jets in my life, and used them and just burning them up for the Lord Jesus Christ. He said, I want you to believe me for a Falcon 7X. So I said, okay.
A Falcon 7 jet like this one to preach to more people around the world. And he's asking his followers for the $54 million.
I really believe that if Jesus was physically on the earth today, he wouldn't be riding a donkey.
People are not affecting climate change. You're going to tell me that back in the Ice Age, how much taxes did people pay and how many changes did governments make to melt the ice? The climate is going to continue to change.
Let me tell you folks about global warming, especially you young folks out there. Don't worry about it.
What does the president actually believe about climate change? Does he still believe it's a hoax? Could you clarify that, since apparently nobody else in the White House can?
Yeah, I have not had an opportunity to have that discussion.
Would it be possible for you to have that conversation with him and then report back to us at the next briefing?
If I can, I will.
For as long as I have been alive, it's been hot in the summer. For the month of August, it's going to be about 2 degrees hotter than the previous August. Well, let's take a minute and think about that. Here's what we should ask ourselves. Why is that even in the news?
I don't know if you saw this guy. He was on Laura Ingraham. And he used to be, it's so funny. It's, it's farce. Marx is right. History repeats itself. First is tragedy and then is farce. This guy used to be a lobbyist for the tobacco industry. Now he's a climate change denier. So, of course, he's got a open door invitation over at Fox News. Here he is. No comment. I'm not going to argue, talk back. I'm just going to play you what he said to Laura Ingraham.
Look, the air is ugly. It's unpleasant to breathe. And for a lot of people, they get anxiety over it. But the reality is there's no health risk. Okay, there's EPA research. They've done lots of clinical research on asthmatics, on elderly asthmatics, on children, on elderly with heart disease. Not a cough or a wheeze from any of them. We have this kind of air in India and China all the time. No public health emergency.
This is Steve Malloy. He's a climate science denier. He used to work for the tobacco industry. He is a hideous human being. I mean, just look at this guy. He's a grotesquerie.
This doesn't kill anybody. This doesn't make anybody cough. This is not a health event. This has got nothing to do with climate. First off, this is wildfire smoke. This is natural.
He said, this is wildfire smoke. It's natural. If it's natural, it has to be good for you, right? Like tobacco. You used to be a lobbyist for the tobacco industry. It's natural. How could it be bad for you? Tobacco's a plant, you POS. Oil is natural. It comes from the ground. It can't be bad for you if it's natural. So Laura Ingraham got a little spooked, and she asked about particulates in the air.
No, particulate matter is very fine soot.
You don't want to be breathing that in all day.
They're just carbon particles. They're innocuous. Okay, by them, they're innocuous. There's nothing in them. They have no effect. EPA has all this testing on real live human beings that shows no effect. This is total junk science.
Particulates, they're just fine. They're fine particles. They're fine. They wouldn't be called, why are they called fine if they're bad for you? They're fine. Well, she got a little spooked and she realized, well, wait a second. We can't tell people not to worry about this.
Here in New York City, have you heard about it? Many cities on the East Coast primarily have this big blanket of orange smog right over the top of it. Our woke friends to the north in Canada, their forest fires got out of hand, and, well, this is what we're dealing with. It's complicating some people's lives, but it's manageable. I'll tell you, it actually smells like wood smoke. It's not an unpleasant odor, to be honest. It's kind of weird when it seeps into the building, but outdoors, I can deal with it.
We have now surpassed what we were supposed to prevent with Paris. 8 years on, it's happened, folks. The world is going to end.
I've been trying to tell this story for 30 years, and the dominant experience I've had is seeing the new evidence come in at first month by month and week by week. Now there are studies every day practically, and it just keeps getting clearer and stronger.
America's on the verge of technological breakthroughs that will enable us to live our lives less dependent on oil.
The evidence is sufficient that we should move towards the most effective possible steps to reduce carbon loading of the atmosphere.
I think we have to accept the view that scientists have, that there is global warming and that human operation, human condition contributes to that.
You have over 90% of the world's scientists who have studied this, stating that climate change is occurring and that humans play a contributing role. It's time to defer to the experts.
Are you convinced that climate change is man-made?
Well, I don't know that that is a resolved issue in science today.
I think that there'll be little change here. It'll go up, it'll get a little cooler, it'll get a little warmer like it always has for millions of years. It'll get cooler, it'll get warmer. It's called weather. I think it's a big scam for a lot of people to make a lot of money.
The United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. Thank you.
The message is over to governments at this stage. We've told you the scientific facts, the evidence, the costs. It is up to the governments now to decide what to do with it.
Como he dicho antes, estamos saliendo del invierno y ya estamos sufriendo pues temperaturas propias del verano, incendios también propios del verano. La emergencia climática no es una emergencia futura, es una crisis actual y también urgente, y por eso creo que el negacionismo no cabe.
A milestone not worth celebrating. Experts from the U.S. National Centers for Environmental Prediction have declared that 3rd of July was the hottest day ever recorded globally.
The average temperature reached 17.01 degrees Celsius, surpassing the August 2016 record of 16.9. Advocates have called the unprecedented heat a death sentence.
Heat waves in India and a heat dome in the southern U.S. the past month have led to dangerously high temperatures. Parts of China have also endured record-breaking heat, with the mercury rising to more than 35 degrees Celsius. Over in Europe, UK residents swelter through the hottest June since records began, while Spain, too, saw its warmest spring ever this year.
Experts say it is not only the rising temperatures that's concerning, but the magnitude with which it's increasing is also cause for alarm. And the World Meteorological Organization now warning that 2024 will match the current hottest year on record due to a combination of human-induced climate change and the El Nino weather pattern.
If this keeps up, this 2023 could well end up being the warmest year on record. And it's a sign that global climate change is strongly with us and is going to continue to influence things.
Look out your window. Do you see fire raining from the sky? Do you see 4 horsemen on the apocalypse? Do you see, my point is, the world didn't end. We're at 1.5 degrees. They said it would be too late if we reached there, that we had to stop that. And yet, now, all this time, they've been talking about El Nino. Well, okay. 1.5 degrees doesn't care whether it's caused by El Nino or climate change. It's still 1.5 degrees. My suspicion is that now that we've reached it, they'll stop talking about El Nino altogether. Or it'll only be an afterthought. Climate, we've reached the 1.5 degree threshold. I don't know how they're going to play it because we've reached it and the world's not ended.
Get a back tattoo?
Should be, I would think. Oh!
Can I get a back tattoo?
We're fucked. We're so fucked. We're so fucked.
No, we're not. No,
I'm sorry, Shelly. I'm sorry. Oh, God, we're so fucked.
No, you got this. You got this. Oh, my God, we're dying.
Oh, my God.
Oh,
No, God.
Oh, no.
All right. So that's the primer for the rest of the show.
Indeed.
Indeed. Yeah. Lots of things to think about in that one. Yep. All right. So we're going to get going. We got a lot to go over. And here we go. So Jen, I know we didn't talk about exactly. I want to do the first one, which I'm going to pull up right now. And because that kind of goes along with the video. This is it's a timeline from Frontline, and this is from 2012. And I thought, you know what? Why not? You know, let's take a little bit of a trip through what the hell happened. And we saw some of it on there. And in 1979, the conference is considered the first. It was the first World Conference, right? It's considered the first major global recognition of man's role in climate change, and will provide the foundation for the United Nations panel to study the issue 9 years later. Carbon dioxide plays a fundamental role in determining the temperature of the Earth's atmosphere, and it appears plausible that an increased amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can contribute to a gradual warming. But the details of the changes are still poorly understood, and that was the report. You remember that, Jennifer?
I sure do.
I mean, we were out of high school, in college probably. All right, 1988, UN forms panel on climate change, and they did that with the World Meteorological Organization, and they established the IPCC, and to assess the scientific data. Yeah. Thought maybe you had something you wanted to say.
No.
Okay. 1997, the Kyoto Protocol is adopted, and that was 37 industrialized nations, including the U.S., to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I just want to cough at that one. The larger burden falls on developed countries because the treaty argues these nations share more responsibility for the current level of pollution, and the treaty will enter into force in 2005. 1998, global warming skeptics make a plan. Oh, yeah, they made a plan, all right. Oil and gas giant ExxonMobil had lobbied against the Kyoto Protocol on the grounds that it would be too expensive, of course, it's always money, and that it put too much of the burden on developed nations. Okay. Then Lee Raymond, the chief executive, became personally convinced that the science was wrong, too. Exxon began funding groups to research his theory, including the Global Climate Science Team, which writes up a national plan to challenge the science behind climate change. Quote, victory will be achieved when average citizens understand or recognize uncertainties in climate science. Recognition of uncertainties becomes part of the conventional wisdom. And then the Oregon petition is organized by the Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine, which was a small group in the Northwest to collect signatures from scientists who believe there's no convincing scientific evidence that climate change is man-made, and they're still doing the same shit. The petition boasts, at last count, some 31,400 signatures, but only 39 were climatologists, and several environmental groups critical of the petition found questionable names, including that of Jerry Halliwell, better known as Ginger Spice, on the list from the Spice Girls. I remember this too. This was a whole big thing that the Spice Girls on the petition, and it's frequently cited by climate change skeptics as evidence of consensus on the issue, and it's still gathering signatures, and they are. from every crackpot out there. 2001, the U.S. withdrew from the Kyoto. George Bush declines to send the Kyoto Protocol to Congress for ratification, effectively withdrawing the United States from the agreement. The administration rejects the treaty because it puts more of a burden for reducing emissions on industrialized nations instead of developing one. Canada withdraws shortly after the U.S. I can't believe they left too, right? The president has become unequivocal. He does not support the Kyoto Treaty, and that was Ari Fleischer. Well, it took place 2005. The Kyoto Protocol took effect, but without major emissions producers, including the U.S. and Russia on board. It's essentially a symbiotic agreement between 141 nations that ratified it. In 2006, new in March, the Mobil CEO signals change. Rex Tillerson takes the helm of the major energy company and says, we recognize that climate change is a serious issue. We recognize that greenhouse gas emissions are one of the factors affecting climate change, Tillerson said. And I'm not going to play that, but the Competitive Enterprise Institute, which is a free market think tank funded in part by the energy industry, releases pro-carbon dioxide ads ahead, like it was in the beginning of my movie, ahead of the release of the global warming documentary, An Inconvenient Truth. One called Energy shows scenes of people enjoying the outdoors and features the tagline, carbon dioxide. We call it, they call it pollution. We call it life. And that's the clip I used and edited.
That was amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing. I found it. After losing his bid for the presidency in 2000, former Vice President Al Gore launches a campaign to educate people about the dangers of global warming. Directed by Davis Guggenheim, this documentary chronicles Gore's personal interest in the issue and the presentations he makes on climate change worldwide. A critical success, the film wins 2 Academy Awards, one for Best Documentary Feature and the other for Best Original Song. In June, public opinion, it changes. A Pew Research poll finds that 41% believe that there is solid evidence. Solid. 2007, here we go. Fox attacks Gore. With the success of An Inconvenient Truth, Gore becomes the face of climate change advocacy, as well as the target of global warming skeptics. Fox News produces a report on Gore's own carbon footprint, accusing him of hypocrisy by traveling by private jet and running up the electricity bill in his home. But he still won the Nobel Peace Prize. Gore won the prize jointly with the IPCC. In his acceptance speech, he speaks of the problem as an urgent danger. Now comes the threat of climate crisis, a threat that is real, rising, imminent, and universal. Once again, it's the 11th hour. The penalties for ignoring this challenge are immense and growing, and at some point near would be unsustainable and unrecoverable. Does that sound familiar, Jennifer? So, the UN releases the definitive report on climate change. The IPCC, the group established by the UN to investigate the climate change, they released a major report confirming that climate change is occurring now, mostly as a result of human activities, with more 500 lead authors and 2,000 expert reviewers. The report is widely deemed the most definitive to date on global warming. Warming of the climate system is unequivocal, as is now evident from observations of increases in global average air and ocean temperatures, widespread melting of snow and ice, and rising global average sea level. There is very high confidence that the global average net effect of human activity since 1750 has been one of warming. Well, in December, Exxon, they stopped funding the skeptics for a while anyway, right? In its 2007 corporate citizenship report, ExxonMobil announces that starting in 2008, it will discontinue the contributions to research groups that question climate change. Other funders step in the void, including the American Petroleum Institute and the Koch brothers, major donors to conservative causes. By 2009, according to Bob Brule, a professor of sociology and environmental science at Drexel University who has tracked this funding, the two link groups named Donors Trust and Donors Capital Fund will come to make 25% of all funding for climate change skeptics. The funds aren't required to list their donors, however, so the contributors aren't known. And my favorite people to hate, the Heartland Institute, they have their first climate change conference. The Heartland Institute, a nonprofit research organization that promotes free market solutions, becomes one of the most prominent backers of groups that are critical of climate change, and its annual conferences become a who's who of climate change skeptic clueless morons. April, the bipartisan consensus on climate change. Former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and current Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, they filmed the ad that you saw, Our Country Must Take Action. And in April, the climate change critics go grassroots. Tim Phillips, president of Americans for Prosperity, a group funded by the Koch brothers, launches a hot air tour to oppose carbon regulation with a hot air balloon bearing the slogan, Global Warming Alarmism, Lost Jobs, Higher Taxes, Less Freedom. For a long time, the other side has had momentum on the issue, he said at the tour's launch in Washington. We can win on this issue. We're going to take this tour across the country, and we're going to take this fight to the other side, and we're going to educate our fellow citizens on this. They sure did, Jennifer, didn't they? McCain.
Yeah, he sure did.
Yeah. McCain, he backed climate change. Republican presidential candidate Senator John McCain expresses support for cap and trade legislation, which would require manufacturers, power plants, and others responsible for major carbon emissions either to reduce pollutants or buy credits to offset them. Instead of idly debating the precise extent of global warming or the precise timeline of global warming, we need to deal with the central facts of rising temperatures, rising waters, and all the endless trouble that global warming will bring, he says, in what his campaign billed as his major speech. The New York Times noted that McCain was the only Republican challenger to call for mandatory limits on emissions. Well, in August, the Democrats addressed climate change. The Democratic Party platform calls climate change an epochal, man-made threat to the planet. Both candidates, Clinton and Obama, they both back a mandatory cap on emissions. Now, in 2009, ExxonMobil advocates a carbon tax. Chief Executive Rex Tillerson says ExxonMobil supports a carbon tax instead of cap and trade legislation. He also states that greenhouse gases are a problem and likely to increase. These two fundamental realities, meeting enormous demand growth and managing the risk of greenhouse gas emissions, are the twin challenges of our time. And then Obama calls for cap and trade, and in his State of the Union, speaking of the ravages of climate change, he calls for a market-based cap on carbon pollution, which would cap the level of carbon emissions that could be produced. That way he could frack the shit out of the country, Little editorial there. Companies that exceed the cap could lease additional credits from companies that produce less than the allotted amount, creating a financial incentive to reduce emissions. But in June, the climate skeptics, they released their report, the non-governmental International Panel on Climate Change. A group established to study the findings of the UN's Climate Change Panel releases a report published by none other than the Heartland Institute, noting that the Earth may be warming, but the cause is primarily natural. A warmer world would be a safer and healthier world for humans and wildlife alike. Oh my God. June and August, the carbon regulation bill fails. The Waxman-Markey carbon regulation bill, known as the American Clean Energy and Security Act, passes the House. The energy bill is intended to reduce pollution from global warming and to move the U.S. toward a clean energy economy. 2009, right? In part by setting performance standards for coal-fueled power plants, for example, and providing funding to train workers for jobs in the renewable energy industry. But in July, the Democratic Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid says he won't bring the legislation forward in the Senate, noting that he wouldn't be able to pass it. We know that we don't have the votes, he says. The bill's collapse marks a major setback for the Obama administration's plans to combat climate change, at the same time making us energy independent with fracking. October, fewer Americans believe in it. A Pew Research Center poll finds that only 36% of Americans believe there is solid evidence that the Earth is warming because of human activity, which was down from 47% in 2008, 41% in 2006. In a larger shift, only 57% of Americans believe there is solid evidence the Earth is warming at all. And then there was ClimateGate. As delegations assemble in Copenhagen for a global summit on climate change, 1,000 hacked emails spanning 13 years surfaced from climate scientists at the University of East Anglia's research unit. Global warming critics say the emails prove that scientists manipulated key evidence that debunked climate change, and they disprove the groundbreaking IPCC report from 2007. Several independent investigators later find that while scientists should have been more open about their work, they did not manipulate the data. The investigations also show that none of the emails affect the scientific consensus on climate change. The IPCC defends the report. There is no possibility of exclusion of any contrarian views. If they have been published in established journals or other publications, are peer-reviewed. 2010, NASA reports further warming. Okay, so NASA says that 2000 to 2009 was the warmest decade on record. Then the map at the left, which I don't have. This one up here. Okay. See how, Jennifer, see how much lighter that is in just how many years? A decade? A couple of decades? The map at the left from NASA shows how much warmer temperatures were during the decade compared to the average temperatures recorded between 1951 and 1980, which NASA notes is common reference. It's a common reference for climate studies. And in May, new report from National Academy of Sciences. The National Academy of Sciences releases its most comprehensive report to date on climate change. Climate change is occurring, is caused largely by human activities, and poses significant risks for, and in many cases is already affecting a broad range of human and natural systems. So in May, the National Academy warns of political assaults on scientists. I remember that because we were talking about this at the job, and there were I was at a university, there's scientists. It was a scary time, actually. In an open letter from 255 members of the National Academy of Sciences, the group says, "We call for an end to McCarthy-like threats of criminal prosecution against our colleagues based on innuendo and guilt by association, the harassment of scientists by politicians seeking distractions to avoid taking out action, and the outright lies being spread about them." And then the Republicans take control of the House. Midterm elections bring a sweeping victory for House Republicans, including the first wave of Tea Party candidates, many of whom stridently oppose climate change. So here comes 2011, and the Republican majority eliminates the House Committee on Global Warming. Republican House Majority Leader John Bonner, who actually now is a big pot farmer, or he's in the pot industry, John Bonner, he didn't see an opportunity he didn't take. Well, that in order to eliminate waste in government like he was, climate change will be handed to the Science Committee. January 25th, Obama's State of the Union speech. Obama talks about energy, but he makes no mention of global warming or climate change in his third address. March. The House committee votes against climate change amendment. All 31 Republican members of the House Energy Committee voted against an amendment proposed by Henry Waxman, if you remember him, from California, accepting climate change, as well as two other amendments with similar language. Congress accepts the scientific finding of the Environmental Protection Agency that warming of the climate system is unequivocal. October. Romney, he questions it. At a fundraiser in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Romney is asked about his stance. Well, my view is that we don't know what's causing climate change on this planet, and the idea of spending trillions and trillions of dollars to try to reduce CO2 emissions is not the right course for us. And then there's Gingrich, and he backtracks. So he was running for the presidential nomination. So he denounces the 2008 ad he made with Pelosi on Fox News, saying it's probably the dumbest single thing I've done in recent years. They're just such assholes. Public opinion turns partisan. All of them. A Pew Research Center poll finds a modest rise in the number of people who believe that human activity is the blame for global warming, up to 38% from 34% in 2010. But the partisan divide remains stark. While 51% of Democrats and 40% of independents say it's mostly because of human activity, only 19% of Republicans and 11% of Tea Party Republicans agree. So in 2012, the climate skeptics, where'd they go? Like they're doing now, to the schools. Texas and Louisiana require teachers to teach both sides of the change issues, as well as valid scientific positions, while Tennessee and Oklahoma introduce similar legislation. Meanwhile, leaked documents from the Heartland Institute reveal plans to pay a consultant for the Energy Department $100,000 to develop a curriculum that teaches the science on global warming is in dispute. January, more warming reports. NASA reports 9 of the 10 warmest years since 1880 have occurred. Then in February, study examines public opinion, and again, public opinion has turned against belief in climate change. Well, we move on to the Republican National Convention, and their platform mentions climate change only once in a passing criticism of Obama's focus on the issue. Finally, Obama's strategy subordinates our national security interests to environmental, energy, and international health issues, and elevates climate change to the level of a severe threat equivalent to foreign aggression. During his acceptance speech, Mitt Romney mocked earlier remarks by Obama on climate change to laughter from the crowd. And then there's the Democratic National Convention. Their party platform altered its language from 2008, acknowledging the science of climate change and calling the phenomenon one of the biggest threats of this generation. Huh? Obama in his speech adopts stronger rhetoric, possibly in an answer to Romney's remarks at the RNC. Climate change is not a hoax. More droughts and floods and wildfires are not a joke. They are a threat to our children's future, but the issue will hardly be mentioned in his campaign for presidency. And that, folks, is 2012. And that organization, We Can Solve It, by the way, that was in the movie, they are defunct. This is all I could find on them. There is nothing there. It's So, Jen, would you like to take the next one?
All right, guys.
All right. There's a method to my madness here.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
So, guys, we're going to get down with grist. When did Republicans start hating
2014.
the environment? Was it 2014?
Yeah, because the last one ended in 12, and now we're
okay.
going historically, we're going to 14.
I see. Roughly 1991, according to a new study, when the Republicans started hating the environment. It's one of those facts that sweeps you back into an alien, almost unrecognizable era. On July 9th, 1970, Republican President Richard Nixon announced to Congress his plans to create the Environmental Protection Agency and the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. By the end of that year, both agencies were a reality. Nowadays, among their other tasks, they either monitor or seek to mitigate the problems of global warming, actions that make today's Republicans, Nixon's heirs, completely livid. To give one example of how anti environment the right today is, just consider this Think Progress analysis finding that over 58% of congressional Republicans refuse to accept the science of climate change. So, what happened to the GOP from the time of Nixon to the present to turn an environmental leader into an environmental retrograde? According to a new study in the journal Social Science Research, the key change actually began around the year 1991 when the Soviet Union fell. The conservative movement was replaced the Red Scare with a new Green Scare and became increasingly hostile to environmental protection at that time, argues sociologist Aaron McBride of Michigan State University and two colleagues. So, is that causal explanation right? Before getting to that question, let's examine the study itself. For starters, it's pretty much undebatable that Americans today are polarized over environmental issues. In a figure in this paper, McCright and his colleagues visualized this polarization by charting the average League of Conservative Voters environmental scores for congressional Democrats and Republicans from 1970 through 2013. Oh, that's an interesting chart. You can see opinions really diverging. That's like polarization in action. This figure suggests that key left-right breakpoint on the environment occurred something in the early 1990s. So does the analysis at the center of the paper look at how Americans belonging to different political parties have answered the same general social survey question about the environment going back to the year 1974? In that year, at regular intervals, ever since, the GSS has asked the following question. We are faced with many problems in this country, none of which can be solved easily or inexpensively. I'm going to name some of these problems, and for each one, I'd like you to tell me whether you think that we're spending too much money on it or too little money, or about the right amount. One of the items then listed is the environment, or improving and protecting the environment. Here's how many Americans responded to the question over time by saying we're spending too little on environmental protection, separated by political party membership. Once again, the key break appears to happen in the early 1990s. You might think that this just reflects a distaste on the right for government spending in general, but using more GSS data, the authors looked at support for government spending on other issues like space exploration and foreign aid, and controlled for this general support for spending in their analysis. So what happened in the early 1990s? Well, for one thing, Bill Clinton was elected, flanked by a Vice President, Al Gore, who had just published a book called Earth in the Balance. That made environmental issues salient in a very political way. And then there was the once super intense fight over habitat protections for the northern spotted owl. Remember that? The authors, for their part, cite the rise of global environmentalism with the 1992 Rio Earth Summit, which they say generated a heightened level of anti-environment activity by conservative movement and the congressional Republicans. Here, They rely on significant part of another 2008 paper noting how the conservative think tank movement mobilized to oppose environmental protections in the 1990s. The upshot is that as environmentalism became an increasingly global movement, many conservatives tarred it with the label socialism. Rio reflects on a heightened sense of urgency for environmental protection that was seen as a threat by conservative elites, stimulating them to replace anti-communism with anti-environmentalism, the study observed. But this is not the only possible explanation for the trends noted above. There has been a great deal of research on why American politics have become so polarized, and theories to explain the trend abound. For instance, one major factor is clearly party sorting, the idea that conservatives have moved more into the GOP over time, even as liberals have, at least to some extent, coalesced in the Democratic Party. So the Republicans answering a general social survey question about the environment in 1996 or so simply were not the same bunch of people who were answering it in 1974. One intriguing related hypothesis posits that the right wing has become more unwilling to compromise in general because it has become more psychologically authoritarianism, closed-minded, prone to black and white thinking. That's not a pattern that would uniquely affect environmental issues, though. If anything, it would be felt most strongly on topics that authoritarians care most about: crime, national defense, religion in public life, and matters of that ilk. Whatever the cause, the consequence is clear. We can't get anything done in a bipartisan way on the environment any longer. The situation, conclude the authors, does not bode well for our nation's ability to deal effectively with the wide range of environmental problems, from local toxins to global climate change, we currently face.
It was pretty good, I thought, for 2014, since we are going historically through this. And here is Statista, which I was looking at. My God, Jennifer, they want like $1,000 a year, $948 a year to have. I was looking, I'm like, okay, a starter account. I don't think so. So we're just going to use what we can get free here. And this, if you guys can see, was lobbying spending of oil and gas companies in the United States during election cycles 1990 to 2022 by receiving political party. Now, I'm going to tell you guys, we're not sitting here saying we are this, we are that, whatever. We are reporting to you history. And this is history. I'm not telling you how to think. We're just showing you. The Democratic Party always took a hell of a lot less money. I mean, in the spending, in millions. So in 2022, it seems like both went down. See, the Republican Party went down and them. But, I mean, the Republicans were taking gazillions of dollars. Look in 2020, 63.6 was it $1 million, $63.6 million. So this is the shit that's happening. This is why we are here, at least the United States. But what happens in the United States, unfortunately, infects the rest of the world. The rest of the world is infected. So they have historically been the greatest recipient of oil and gas companies' lobbying expenditures. And that's, that's pretty
It's a fact.
Pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I still think 12.3 million in the U.S. to the Democrats, I guess, what are they, playing the game, or those conservative Democrats? We are not going to go into that right now. It's just sucks every way that's how our elections are, and this is how money is in politics, and money buys and does everything. So, Jennifer. You got the California story. We're jumping right now, right to where we are.
Okay, guys. We're going to cover an article that was found in The Guardian. And what was the that came out 2023. Okay, so now we're into current day. This just came out 2 days ago, so this is current stuff. Oil lobbyists spend millions to stall California's game-changing climate bill. Bills would force large companies to do business in the state to report all emissions and crack down on bogus carbon offset claims. 2 transparency bills in the California legislature would require corporations to disclose more information about their emissions and their efforts to fight the climate crisis. The oil and gas industry is spending millions to kill them. The bills would force large companies to do business in California to report all of their emissions and also require firms that buy or sell carbon offsets, which represent a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, to disclose more information in an effort to crack down on bogus climate claims. Both measures have momentum but could be blocked by moderate Democrats historically aligned with corporate interests. Since the legislation would make new information available beyond California, the 2 bills could represent a watershed moment for holding big polluters accountable when they claim climate bona fide supporters say. Reporting requirements for corporate emissions are currently fragmented, and the Climate Disclosures Bill would be a landmark law, pinning down the impacts of some of the world's largest companies. And as more companies market themselves as partners in the climate fight, greater oversight over voluntary carbon trading markets could help verify their claims. The carbon offset bill help with this by requiring information on who is buying and selling credits to be reported publicly. The Western State Petroleum Association, a trade organization, opposes these bills and has already spent $2.38 million on lobbying and advocacy groups this year. While some oil and gas companies in California have expressed their support for rolling back climate change, industry opposition fits into an agenda of delaying action, said Ryan Skeeter, communication director in the Climate Center. Climate denial won't fly in this state, and companies are smart enough to figure that out, so they delay as long as possible. Delay is the new denial. Climate denial won't fly in this state. We can't improve what we don't measure. California lawmakers are evaluating the bills as climate crisis intensifies around the world. Halfway into 2023, smoke from extreme wildfires blanketed Canada and the US. Record-breaking temperatures have struck Texas, Mexico, Ireland, Britain, Puerto Rico, Europe, North Africa, and Asia. In California, WSPA insists that it wants to be part of the climate conversation. However, the trade group remains staunchly opposed to new reporting requirements proposed under the Climate Disclosures Bill, although its representatives have said little about why. According to Stagel, the group's position is not based so much on wanting to progress as it is on how do we get to those places, noting that the oil and gas industry is promoting solutions like hydrogen and biofuels. Is it that we are often pushing too far too fast? Such narratives are refuted by the United Nations' insistence that deep, rapid, and sustained emissions reductions are needed now. Companies that participate in California's cap and trade system already report emissions information to the state, including Scope 3 emissions from burning oil and gas sold by fossil fuel companies, which account for the vast majority. Scope 1 and 2 refer to emissions from a business day-to-day activity in electricity usage. The Disclosures bill, authored by Senator Scott Weiner, would expand reporting requirements to all companies generating revenues for more than $1 billion a year. It's more expansive than a rule currently under consideration by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, and the disclosures have the potential to affect climate action worldwide, said Mary Kreisman, the CEO of California Environmental Voters. This would be pretty monumental, said Kreisman, whose organization is sponsoring the legislation. There is a movement to say we can't improve on what we don't measure, full stop. Sometimes companies claim to reduce their climate pollution by buying offset credits, which can be used for a company or a country to offset their own emissions. But offsets have a dubious track record across the industries and regions. One study into offsets for cooking stoves found that only 1 in 7 represented actual reductions. Another study found that 93% of Chevron's offsets over the last 2 years were likely junk. Chevron, which is a member of WSPA, opposes the carbon offset bill and spent $1.27 million on lobbying this spring, the most of any oil company. If these companies want to get the benefit of showing they are on the right side of history, the carbon offset bill will encourage them to show that they are purchasing offsets that will actually make a difference. And that was said by the Assembly member Jesse Gabriel, and he authored the bill. Moderate Democrats will decide the bill's fate. Opponents on the climate disclosures bill have been focused on swaying moderate Democrats who are historically more aligned with corporate interests. The bill is currently headed to the state assembly, where it must be first approved by committees before proceeding to a floor vote. Last year, a nearly identical version of the bill failed in the assembly by 1 vote. Democrats have a supermajority in the assembly, outnumbering Republicans 62-18. But a small contingent of moderate Dems who joined Republicans in voting against climate disclosures last year successfully blocked the bill from passing. 15 others registered no vote recorded in 2022. Combined, these legislators have received millions from the California Chamber of Commerce, as well as the oil and gas industry and other corporate interests. It'll be a tough bill to pass these in the assembly, said Kreisman. We're hopeful this year because it's part of a strong package of other corporate leadership and accountability bills. Meanwhile, the carbon offset bill passed by a large majority in the assembly and is now moving through the state Senate. Gabriel is hopeful about its chances. As scrutiny of the fossil fuel industry has grown, companies have cloaked themselves as climate warriors, said Melissa Aronzik, an associate professor of media at Rutgers University, who studies the history of the industry's public relations strategies. The public has caught on to the squishy climate claims in recent years, but oil majors still often announce more actions or aspirations that are impossible to measure. End quote. These are efforts to sidestep real rules, regulation, and other frameworks to actually hold these companies accountable. The irony is that it's a very simple need that we have, which is to phase out fossil fuels. It's straightforward. There's nothing straightforward about this. This is just gobbledygook, as far as I can tell.
But it is. It's exactly what goes on. That's why we are where we are.
Yeah.
That's why. Same in other countries. Same shit. Same shit and everything. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing in the interest of time. It's just more. Oil giants invest in exploration as profits Trump climate, like we hate that word. And again, I'm not going to. This is this year. It'll be in the show notes. Exploration revival follows pressure from investors to maximize oil and gas profits rather than invest in lower margin renewable energy. And basically, this article is just a we are so fucked article. And I just wanted to show you what Sheldon Whitehouse is doing, because he seems to be one of the only ones that actually really understands everything. And they want to look for staffers to probe fossil fuels. I mean, I just don't know what this is going to do anymore. They could look into, we know what they did. Everybody knows what happened. But this committee wants to have an oversight director, and they want to have staffers that have experience investigating fossil fuel influence campaigns. I guess it's the influence campaign. It's the lies, but you see, whenever they start talking about doing things like this, then they're called, that they're squashing free speech, and that, the other side then says that side is fascist because they want to squelch the bullshit, like the stuff that the Heartland Institute puts out. So we'll see what happens if this actually happens in here. So now we're going to move to Inside Climate News. And Jennifer, we have the two more. Now, this was pretty good. And I don't know if we're going to have time to read the last one, but we're certainly going to read this one because we want to wrap this up with the science.
Right, guys. And this just came out on Independence Day, July 4th, 2023. June extremes suggest parts of the climate system are reaching tipping points. Research shows heat domes, wildfires, and vanishing polar ice are the symptoms. Unabated greenhouse gas emissions are the cause. Wow, look at this fire. Gosh. That's in Quebec, Canada. June 2023 may be remembered as the start of a big change in the climate system, with many key global indicators flashing red warning signs, amid signs that some systems are tipping toward a new state from which they may not recover. Earth's critical reflective polar ice caps are at their lowest extent on record in the satellite era, with the sea ice around Antarctica at record low extent by far, spurring worried scientists to share dramatic charts of the missing ice repeatedly. In the Arctic, the month ended with the Greenland ice sheet experiencing one of the largest June melt events ever recorded, with scientists reporting that June 2023 was the hottest June ever measured, breaking the 2019 record by a staggering 0.16 degrees Celsius. And this is a little tweet from our very fave Zach Labe. Well, with at Twitter sinking, I might as well post a graph of sea ice sinking. Okay. Whatever he said, but look at 2023. It is way off on a brand new track, and this is up to the current moment, and this is global sea ice, counting both Antarctica and the Arctic sea ice. So there you go. With the record warmth in June 2023 as a whole is now at odds on favorite to be the warmest year on record, climate scientist Zeke Hoffather wrote in Twitter. Globally, the ocean set record for warmth on the surface and down to more than 6,000 feet deep throughout the month, with temperatures so far above the norm that the conditions elicited more graphs showing the anomaly. They've been shared thousands of times by scientists, policymakers, and the public. And in Canada, forest areas about the size of Kentucky have been burned, choking huge swaths of central and eastern North America with acrid wildfire smoke, with some of the haze even reaching Europe. There was record-breaking heat on nearly every continent during the month, according to independent climate statistician Maximilian Herrera, along with deadly late June heat in Mexico and the south central United States. Extreme readings have been widespread in remote Siberia, with hundreds of daily heat records, including readings higher than 95 degrees Celsius. That must not be Celsius, that must be Fahrenheit. That's a misprint. Close to the Arctic Circle. If it was 95 degrees Celsius, the ocean would be boiling. So it's not. That's wrong. The heat will just get worse, he posted in Twitter. Herrera also tracks notable regional extremes like historic mountain heat wave in Iran, where temperatures in late June spiked between 100 and 120 degrees Fahrenheit at elevations between 1,500 and 5,000 feet above sea level that are normally far cooler. During the first week of July, temperatures in Iraq are forecast to breach 120 degrees Fahrenheit. And here's the tweet that Zeke Hosfather did, where he shows that the June global surface temperatures since 1980, if you compare them over the last 43 years, they're off the hook. Look at that. Oh my God. These extraordinary extremes could be an early warning of tipping points toward different weather or sea ice or fire regimes, said University of Exeter climate researcher Tim Lenton. We call it flickering when a complex system starts to briefly sample a new regime before tipping into it. Let's hope I'm wrong on that. In the meantime, the tropical Pacific Ocean is shifting into the warm El Nino phase of a 2 to 7 year Pacific Ocean cycle that can boost the average global temperature by 0.2 degrees Celsius, enough to stoke the planet's fever to a dangerous new high. The onset of El Nino will greatly increase the likelihood of breaking temperature records and triggering more extreme heat in many parts of the world and in the ocean, said the World Meteorological Organization Secretary General Petri Talas. Early warnings and anticipatory action of extreme weather events associated with this major climate phenomenon are vital to save lives and livelihoods. I expect a step change to higher global mean temperatures starting this year, said atmospheric scientist Kevin Tremberth, a distinguished scholar at the National Center for Atmospheric Research and honorary faculty at the University of Auckland. And next year will be the warmest on record, either 1.4 or 1.5 C above pre-industrial. The higher of those levels is the amount to which the United Nations 2015 Paris Agreement aspired to limit climate change. But the continued upward trajectory of global temperatures could make that goal impossible to reach. I expect it then to oscillate about that value and not to come down again, he said. The El Nino temperature nudge comes against a backdrop of record high carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere, adding that the rate of increase is as high as it has ever been and continues to accelerate. In other words, there is no bending down on the CO2 record, as should happen with all the new actions being taken in the US and elsewhere, he said. The problem is that China and India are accelerating their coal-fired power stations and overwhelming all other cuts. Antarctic sea ice decline has a cascade of impacts. The persistence of the startling Antarctic sea ice decline may be one of the most puzzling and worrisome of the recent cluster of climate extremes. Until recently, Researchers expected less sudden changes in Antarctica because it's such a vast reservoir of coldness and surrounded by a continental swirl of ocean currents and winds that have buffered the continent to some degree. But at the end of June, getting into the heart of the southern hemisphere winter, an area of ice about the size of Texas and Alaska, nearly 1 million square miles, was missing. As southern hemisphere's winter set in, the sea ice grew more slowly than ever observed in the satellite area. And here, this is what is freaking scientists out. If we look at this Antarctic sea ice anomaly, there are anomalies and then there's a new track entirely. And that is what is happening now in 2023. We are dropped out and let's see what happens now.
Yeah.
Sometimes anomalies are just a one-time regional snapshot. But the Antarctic sea ice extent has been far below average since at least January, when Antarctic climate expert Ted Scampos, a senior scientist with Earth Science and Observation Center at the University of Colorado Boulder, called the condition extreme. Quote, "Frankly, we are still working to understand it." Wow. But nearly every new study implicates human-caused warming, as measurements of wind and ocean currents show how the global temperature increase has pushed the Antarctic wind belt poleward, which has also shifted relatively warmer water closer to the icy edges of the frozen continent. Other recent research shows that the Southern Ocean encircling Antarctica and extending northward to 60 degrees south latitude stored a disproportionately large percentage of the heat trapped in the atmosphere by greenhouse gases and then absorbed by the world's oceans between 2005 and 2017. The study showed the Southern Ocean took up 45 to 62% of the heat absorbed by the world's oceans, even though it makes up only 6.25% of the global ocean surface area. In the absence of its reflective sea ice cover, the darker colored ocean can absorb even more heat, potentially leading to earlier and more extensive melting during the next austral summers. And as the fringe of ice around Antarctica gets smaller, warmer ocean water can more easily flow towards the floating ice shelves that buttress vast areas of inland ice that could start flowing into the sea faster to speed sea level rise. There are also ecosystem impacts. The abundance of certain types of plankton and krill at the base of the ocean food chain is linked with the Antarctic sea ice. A disruption to those organisms ripples up through the ecosystem because the feeding and breeding cycles of many other species, including seals and seabirds, is closely linked with sea ice. A heat dome settles on North America. Climate scientist Michael Mann, director of the Center for Science, Sustainability and the Media at the University of Pennsylvania, said there is probably a global warming fingerprint. I don't know. On the deadly dome of stagnant hot air that is baking large parts of Mexico, the southwestern and central United States, and Canada. Also playing a role in the extreme weather we're seeing, including south central U.S. heat dome and Canadian wildfires, is what appears to be another resonance event. He said, referencing research that shows how the warming climate favors planetary atmospheric wave patterns that can give rise to persistent summer weather extremes. In this case, it is likely behind many of the extreme conditions we're seeing right now in North America and Eurasia. My goodness. Oh my God. Oh my God. The cumulative daily total wildfire. This thing is off the hook, Sandy. It's so scary. We're just in another world. We're totally in another world.
Well, another world that we were not in 20 years ago, or they didn't think they were in and didn't anticipate this. See the history? Why we're screwed?
Now I see why you did it this way. Now I get it. Thank you for putting this together. Another part of the heat dome settled over Canada, where wildfires had released 160 million tons of carbon by the end of June, the highest annual total estimated emissions for Canada since satellite monitoring began in 2003. Scientists with the EU's Copernicus Atmospheric Monitoring Service reported. And there's also new research suggesting links between vanishing ice and snow in the planet's polar reaches and climate extremes in the mid-latitudes where most people live. Quote, the pile of evidence linking a rapidly warming Arctic with extreme summer weather events continues to grow. Climate scientist Jennifer Francis wrote on Twitter in June 30th, sharing a link to a near peer-reviewed study in Nature Communications that solidifies the hypothesis that changes in the Arctic can lead to a wavier jet stream that can trap heat domes in place. In recent years, those patterns have sometimes persisted for months, with only short pauses, including last summer, when a heat dome over Europe lasted several months and fueled that continent's hottest summer on record. Earth's energy imbalance disrupts the climate system. At the top of the planet, scientists have been watching an extreme ocean heat wave in the North Atlantic just as carefully because it could be a symptom of disruption to the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC, a critical part of the global climate system that transports cold and warm ocean water between the poles. Sea surface temperatures about 9 degrees Fahrenheit above average in the region could also contribute to heat waves over an adjacent land area. Oh my God, and here's the global sea surface temperature anomaly. Crap.
And this is Leon. He's in that group on Twitter with us, Jennifer, that I brought you in.
Crap.
Leon.
Okay.
And Leon and these guys, every day I read what they're talking about with with the Antarctic especially. And I was not very clued into the Antarctic until I was invited into this little group. And oh, wow. It's scary as shit. But he's talking about the temperatures. And Jim is in that group too. So when you get these guys going, man, it's a little over my head sometimes, but I'm learning. I'm
and he says we need to seriously consider the possibility that this warming spike will be worse than the 1997 and the 2015 super El Niños. Yep. Well, there you go. We're off to the races, aren't we?
Off to the races.
Crap. Record-breaking ocean temperatures in region around the globe are not surprising Trenberth, who specializes in analyzing deep ocean heat content down to more than 6,000 feet below sea level, where more than 90% of all the heat trapped in the atmosphere by carbon pollution has been absorbed. That heat is measured as energy rather than temperature value, and it's equivalent at this point to the energy of 5 nuclear bombs exploding in the ocean each second, or about 100 times more energy than all the electricity produced in 2021 globally. For Trenberth, that global energy imbalance building steadily since the start of the fossil-fueled industrial age, is the best measure of how humans have affected the climate, because the energy balance isn't affected by seasonal or annual variations or by shifts in regional climate patterns. And if the heat building that energy imbalance in the oceans was to stop, many of the impacts would rapidly decrease, even though the water is warmer. It's not global temperature that matters, but Earth's energy imbalance. If you have a pot of water on the stove, while heating, convection occurs, he said. Ultimately, it boils off water as steam. But as soon as you turn off the heat source, all that behavior stops. The temperature is the same, but the heating is no more. And that is that, guys. Wow, that's pretty freaking grim, must say.
Yeah. We're not going to do this one. But that was good because I thought that was very comprehensive. It gave us an overview of where we are.
Yeah.
And this is just Jeff Baradelli, who I really like. And Jeff talks about, it's basically the same stuff. And he's a meteorologist, so the link will be in here. This is the visual below. This is the message that is stark and simple. On a scale of thousands of years, this visual illustrates the Earth's temperature is now shooting straight up. And here are a few, he has a few takeaways. He talks about the rate of warming today is unprecedented in the 20,000 years shown. In fact, coming out of the last ice age, it took 10,000 years for Earth's average temperature to warm 3 degrees C. And astonishingly, humans due to burning fossil fuels and greenhouse gases will likely cause the same amount of warming in 200 years. That means our current warming rate is 50 times that of natural warming rate that preceded the most recent ice age. So you'll be able to see this. Everything will be in the show notes. It's pretty heavy shit, Jen.
Very, very heavy shit. So scary. I really feel it, since the beginning of 2023, things have just really picked up in a huge, giant freaking way. And we're seeing it. And this is what we've been talking about for the last decade. We've been like, global warming and climate change, abrupt climate change, it's happening right now, abrupt weather weirding. And now it's actually happening. Right. So here we are, guys. It's really scary, sad, and unfortunate. And
let's show real quickly that what is actually going on in Spain.
Oh God, yes.
Yeah, let's just.
With funding from oil and gas companies,
That was quite, and there was a lot of them. There was a lot of things. And that other clip that I showed by accident, that was just another fossil fuel, kind of piece of shit about Exxon. But yeah, so here we are, guys. Let's see anything you guys, I am sorry we have been busy doing the show. Hi, Bongo, Dave, and Kim. Thank you for moderating. I'm hoping you're feeling better. And everybody, well, Jen, you want to give the post-mortem?
I mean, I don't really even know what to say. The insanity in the political field is out of sight. We are definitely firmly in the Marana scene. There is no question about it. We are so fucked because of this mental state that we can't seem to grapple with our existential demise, which is underway. And we're just kind of, everybody is engaged in different parts of the 5 stages of grief. All of us, by definition of this situation that we're in. And, the best the Republicans can seem to do is that. So that's how they're showing their true colors. Everything is being revealed about who we are as people and how we respond to this crisis, mentally, emotionally, what we take on board, what we fight, what we bargain with, all of that, so it's a freaking scary time to be alive, but it's also
Scott
pretty
says
fascinating.
It's best to ignore the political nonsense at this point. I usually do, but today it was, I just felt that there was a reason I wanted to go over history, and not, forever history, but I wanted to impart to you guys that this is why we are where we are, because of the craziness of, at least in the United States and maybe Canada, the political systems that are failures and collapsing, basically failing collapses. So there you go. All right, Jen. Love you. Thank you,
I'm thoroughly depressed now. Hope everybody's doing great.
I'm not depressed. I've accepted it. I think right now, this week, I'm in acceptance. You vacillate.
I know.
I know we do. We all do. And we love you. And guess, I'll tell you guys, Jennifer Francis is going to be our live guest in a couple of weeks. I'm working that out with her. She doesn't do many lives. We're going to have her live. So if you have questions, start thinking of them now. Dr. Jennifer Francis from Woods Hole. It's going to be good. And at that, I am saying good night. Good night, Jen.